It is now my pleasure to introduce our new president, Steve Haft, to introduce our speaker. Steve is the VP of HR for Bordeaux. He's served on the board of directors for the last 3 years and serves on the Education and Government Affairs Committee. We are very excited for his leadership. Please help me welcome Steve Haft.
Good afternoon. I am pleased to be able to introduce Chief Ken Thomas. He was promoted to chief on January 21st of 2011. He's been with the Kent Police Department since 1989 and has a history of innovative leadership and community outreach. He previously served as captain of the patrol division. As an officer and sergeant, he has held various assignments with the agency, including patrol administrative officer, narcotics detective, supervisor of major crime unit. As a patrol lieutenant, Ken supervised the neighborhood response team, the special investigations unit, which makes up gangs, narcotics, and PROACT. The special operations unit makes up bikes and marine patrol. The field training officer program, crime analysis, and was the commander of the SWAT team. Chief Thomas is credited with leading Kent's community-oriented policing unit that has resulted in the reduction of residential burglaries and auto thefts. Please join me in a warm welcome for Police Chief Ken Thomas.
Well, thank you. Gosh, what a great crowd. This is going to be a great opportunity for me to spend a few minutes to talk to you about or provide you with some information about Proposition A that last night the City Council approved a resolution to put on the ballot to go out to the voters. So thank you all, and I'm very passionate about this topic, and I'll go through some information. I'm then going to call up Officer Wayne Graff, who's part of the Kent Police Officers Association. He's going to speak for just a few minutes. We'll then take any questions and answers, and then Cynthia Boyd will come up and say a few words to finish us up. So let's get started here. Proposition A, what is it? So Proposition A, in order to fund additional police officers and support personnel, that's for our department, to include records, corrections, court personnel, and an additional prosecutor and defense attorneys. The city is responsible to pay for defense attorneys also, all of those positions. So it's essentially to increase the property tax. It's currently at, not property tax, the utility tax. It's currently at 6%, and we will be asking the voters to increase that to 8%. So I think it's important to look at crime and that's an ambulance, by the way. That's not a police car. It's an ambulance. Crime over the last few years, when comparing the city of Kent with those agencies around us in the Puget Sound region, and you can see, with the exception of Bellevue, the crime is pretty consistent. The crime rate is pretty consistent between the city of Kent and the other areas. We're actually about right in the middle. We're not higher or lower. We're about right in the middle as we compare with Seattle, Tacoma, Federal Way, Auburn, Renton, and Everett. And that's the overall crime rates for all crimes, property crimes and persons crimes. Currently, the Kent Police Department has the lowest number of police officers per 1,000, using that same ratio or crime rate of whether it's crimes per 1,000. And here, let's talk about officers or employees per 1,000. Our police department has the lowest ratio of officers per 1,000, lower than any other jurisdiction in the region. And here you can see we have 1.08 officers per 1,000 as compared to Seattle, all of those different cities. So when I looked at that the first time, I thought, gosh, what does it mean 1.08 to 1.38. What makes that difference? Tomorrow, if the city of Kent hired 25 brand new police officers and we were fully staffed with this, we would be at about 1.4 officers per 1,000. So that's kind of what that means. We're about 25 officer positions authorized just to get us in the middle from where we're at. Another way to look at that is if you look at the number of crimes in the community to the number of police officers or staff that we have, you can see that it inverts. It goes just the opposite. Kent has the highest number of crimes and incidents per authorized personnel. So although we had pretty consistent, the same crime rate with the rest of those comparable cities, you're seeing that our number of officers are so much lower. Each officer is handling considerably more incidents than those of our comparables. Last year was a tough year. It's the first time in probably ever for our department, we paid over $2 million in overtime. And much of that overtime was mandatory overtime. The officers didn't get a choice, and it was to cover calls for service on the street and for call outs for major crimes and other incidents. Some of the officers worked up to 16-hour shifts. They would have to hold over, and that's the maximum. We would let them work, and then we would send them home. But that's $2 million. There was another $300,000 that we didn't pay as the city, but it's off-duty work. So I just got a text right before the lunch where it said, hey, officers, we need 2 people every day this week for a certain amount of time to work for Scarcella Brothers Construction to do flagging. Well, that's not mandatory overtime, and that's not overtime that's paid for by the city. So therefore, if you add that in, which we really need to keep things moving in our community, that's one example, there's another $300,000+ that was spent, but that was paid for by businesses in the community. So really $2.3 million went towards overtime. So I put up a couple of the charts on, or graphs on crime. So there's violent crime, homicides, and thefts. And we left in the 2006 numbers just to show that crime is trending in the wrong direction. If you looked overall, crime may not be where it was in 2006 in some of the categories. Here it is, but that theft one is the only one that it's higher in now. In just about every other category, it was higher in 2006, with the exception of these 2, homicide and thefts. But we're trending in the wrong direction. We're trending up, so it may not be. I know one question is, gosh, if crime is down and it's still down, why would we need more officers? Well, the reason is if you look at the data, it's trending in the wrong direction, and we want to get out in front and not wait until crime is completely out of control to try to do something about it. As you can see, let's start with theft. And theft is a challenge for us, a significant challenge, because of the opioid crisis. We are working hard to deal with the mentally ill and those affected with drug addictions and the opioid. And you as business owners are victims of a lot of thefts and a lot of quality of life issues that we are having a difficult time keeping up with because of our number of staffing, that really our community deserves much better from the police. I'm suggesting that with the amount of staffing that we have right now, we can't keep up with the different quality of life issues as well as we could. Homicides, it says 11. I learned it's actually 13, so that number is higher. We had a tough year last year. We had 13 homicides. Not all were gun related, but a lot were. We had an incident just last week over off 108th and 240th. It was a gang-related shooting. And I just want to, I don't, the person who's dead is dead, and so I don't want to say negative stuff, but we need to be real and upfront and honest. It's a tragedy. That young man was shot and killed. Unfortunately, that young man was a hardcore gang member. This was a gang fight. And I believe that within the past year, he had been arrested on at least 4 occasions for serious violent felony crimes like robbery and possession of a gun, and he was already back out on the street. So it was very predictable that either he was going to get shot or he was going to shoot somebody. And that is unfortunate. That is really a tragedy. We've had to modify some of our entire units in the police department to deal with nothing but gang and gun violence. And we think much of that is due to the housing prices and redevelopment that's going on in Seattle that's pushing many more people into our fast-growing community, which causes us to react and respond. And when you look at that ratio of officers per 1,000 residents, we're not even close to where we used to be. We just haven't caught back up yet with our number of officers to do as good a job as we possibly can. I think another important part, yes, sir?
Did they catch the shooter?
Not yet, and I'll tell you that I talked with my detectives yesterday. I've been getting updates. I think we have a decent idea who the shooter is. And I'm not making excuses, but I'm going to be honest with you and tell you the challenges. Those that survived will not cooperate at all. And some of those that, hold on one second, some of those that survived have parents that won't allow their kids to cooperate. In fact, my detectives explained to me how the mom wouldn't even let the detectives interview her son. The detectives had to ask the mom questions. The mom would go in and ask the son and come back out and tell the detectives. There's a lot of frustration because of the effort that we put in having our detectives out and the amount of officers and the amount of effort that goes into it. When we know that the people know, the victims know who the suspect is, and they will not cooperate, and their parents will not allow their kids to cooperate. So we're working it, we're trying to get it through other means, technology, but it's a challenge. Yes, sir, you had another question.
Yeah, well, you have one of your police $100,000 cameras up there. How come we didn't take the images out of that?
Yeah, well, we did.
So we know who it is.
Well, just because we got images on the camera, it doesn't mean we know who it is.
If you have a gang unit, you gotta know who's in the gangs here.
We do.
Then it should be a slam dunk. Biden's only got 2.
Well, it should be, and you would think that. It's the gang, the shooters, we believe, and I don't want to give up too much information about what we already know, but they're out of Seattle. It's a central district Seattle beef with gangs that have made their way down into Kent. So I understand your frustration, though.
Jenny Rydberg here. I'm a lawyer. There is no slam dunk in a homicide case.
The guy with
Okay,
4 felonies
there is
was
none.
dead. Why was he out?
That is a great question, and that is a big, that's a big form of our frustration that we're trying to work with. And
You're arresting people at safety boards multiple times with felonies, and they're out. 20% of the criminals paid 80% of the crime. If you solve those 20, you don't need more police. I want to get you more police, but you save a lot of time.
And I will tell you, that's why we look at the numbers from 2006 on. With the exception of this slide, you'll see that we have considerably less, because I agree with you that a very small percentage of people commit the large number of crimes, and that's why we built our intelligence-led policing off that concept. And that's why we have been, over the years, extremely successful at driving the crime rate down. Here's what happened. The opioid crisis completely threw that concept out the window. when you have people that have mental health, they've been kicked out of treatment facilities, they're out on the street, they're not supported by the state. You have people with drug addictions, and the opioid is a huge one. That concept, that theory of policing, we've lost it. Now we need to be innovative and find new and innovative ways to address that concept. I do want to hit one other thing about the violence. I mentioned last year was a tough year, notwithstanding the 13 homicides that occurred, which the impact that has on our detectives and our staffing. We also had 5 officer-involved shootings. We have never had 5 officer-involved shootings in 1 year. We had a tough year. Our officers were put in very dangerous and difficult situations, and they had to respond to that. Each one of those was, just about every one of those except one, was multiple officers involved, so that's 2 officers or more. Those officers are put on administrative leave. They have to go through, we have to do an impartial investigation done by an outside agency. We then have to do a review. We send them to a doctor. We have to go through a full process before we can bring those officers back to work. What happens is people have to work overtime to cover those shifts while those officers are out for between 2 weeks and a month. Everybody handles it differently. Some handle it differently than others, and they can come back quicker. Some officers come back too quick, and then we end up having to send them out later and get them more mental health counseling and treatment to help them. But what that means is in 2017, with that big of an increase in going out and seeing violence and crime and death, and then being involved in officer-involved shooting situations and having to work mandatory overtime to cover the street, our workforce was extremely tired and extremely stressed. And I think it's important that people understand what our staff has to go through. It's easy to say, gosh, my house got broken into or my car got broken into. Why wasn't there an officer here in 10 minutes and he wasn't very nice to me, or she wasn't very nice today, and that's a challenge that we as leadership have to work through. We want to support our staff, but there is a level of understanding that they're under an immense amount of fatigue and stress. Not making excuses, I'm trying to build some understanding on why some of that happens, because just about every one of those phone calls comes into me, and then we try to work through it. We still want to be respectful to our community, and that's important. Just want to build some understanding on that. And it goes to what we went into a little bit. The mission of our police department is to aggressively fight crime while serving with compassion. It is important to us that we take care of our community. Our primary job really is to keep this community safe and do everything that we can. And I'm telling you, right now, with the number of staffing that we currently have, we're not able to do that as effectively as we feel that you deserve as business owners, as residents. We want to be able to do a better job. You deserve a better job, and I can tell you the men and women of our police department are giving it everything that they've got, and that's why the city council has gone out with this initiative to try to support and get the staffing that we need to be effective. And I think it goes into, we're going to hire between, if this passes, between 20 and 25 additional police officers, additional corrections officers, additional records specialists. I can tell you, not only with ratio, but let's look at records specialists. Before we annexed in 2010, we had, just in sheer numbers, more record specialists than we have today, support staff. So now we've grown by about 30 to 40,000 additional people in the community, and we have fewer support staff than we had before we did that. So we have some catching up to do. as part of this initiative, we're not going out to say, give us an unreasonable amount of money so we have more officers than anybody else has. We're saying we just want to be in the ballpark, and we think we can do a much better job of keeping you safe and improving quality of life in our community.
So can I ask you a question about the hiring?
Yeah.
I know that there's been struggles in the past to find good quality officers to hire. So how can you address that, and if that's going to be a concern if we do get this passed?
Yeah, it's going to be a concern. We will not compromise on the integrity. We will not lower our standards just to bring more people here. If you want to be a Kent police officer, you have to be top quality. You have to have integrity. You have to care about people. You have to be a hard worker. And you have to be the type of person that can fulfill that mission. We want you to go out and work hard and catch bad guys, and we want you to treat people right. I don't want somebody that can just be one or somebody that just can be the other. If you can't do both, we're not interested. We'll take the extra time to find only the top quality people to be a part of our police department. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to hold it together as well as we have, I'll get you in just 1 second, is because we're not willing to compromise on our standards. We will get those people hired though. They're out there. We've bolstered our unit. We've almost tripled our hiring unit. Officer Graff is the main recruiting and hiring officer, and we've brought in extra people, so we absolutely can get there. And but thank you, good question. Yes, sir.
Are you competitive from the salary and benefit standpoint to attract lateral entry officers from other agencies, or do you think you're going to be able to provide a competitive package to attract officers?
I think we are. I don't think we're above anybody. I believe our pay and benefits are about in the middle. So we're not going to pull anybody out because we get paid more. We're not going to be able to, but what the Kent Police Department has going for it is we have an incredible workforce of outstanding people across the board. We get laterals in from out of state, we get laterals from in-state, we hire new officers, and they say there is a difference with the Kent Police Department and how our officers are treated by the administration, on how the officers are treated by each other, our community support. There is something different. We say, do you want to come to work, be supported, and go out and catch bad guys and take care of the community, or work for a different agency that has different priorities? We have some of the best training that we provide to our officers, so we try to make up for it in other areas than just money. Any other, oh, yes ma'am?
So in talking about the new or the additional staff, does that include our canine unit expanding?
Well, right now, interestingly enough, we just promoted 2 people to sergeant, and both of them were canine officers. So we just had that discussion yesterday. When we're fully staffed with canine officers, we have 4. So that means we have canine coverage 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Well, the 2 officers that just got promoted to sergeant were both canine officers. And fortunately enough, both of their dogs were ready to retire and cycle out. So the timing was perfect. We had high quality officers. The dogs were going to retire anyway. But we just had that conversation yesterday. How quickly are we going to be able to get the officers back in? We need to identify dogs. Generally, we go to California to get the dogs, bring them back, and then there has to be a training class. And it's about a 3-month class where we send the dog and the handler. So we're talking about, should we send 2 at a time? Because we have 3 openings. Or do it 1 at a time and stagger it. Because of the staffing issues, we can spread it out a little bit. But canines have been incredibly positive and beneficial to the community. So we're gonna get back up to 4. I guess a long way of saying that.
A quick question for you, because last year when you came to talk, you were talking about the media coverage of police in general, the police force in general, and how negative that was. And so you were having issues finding people even interested in becoming policemen because it's much easier to be a firefighter, where everybody's like, oh, thank God you're here, versus a cop shows up and it's like, are you going to shoot me? Are you still seeing issues with that? I know you were working really hard to turn that image around in Kent especially, but how is that impacting your hiring process?
It's still a piece of it because it's a nationwide perception of police and policing that is somewhat challenging. What we're doing is we are responding quickly. If there's a CPR in progress with heroin overdoses, we have Narcan in every one of our police cars. People are trained. So that's the part of serving with compassion. We are doing everything we can to kind of be like the firefighters in some areas, that we're out there helping people and trying to save lives rather than just taking people to jail. So very good point. It doesn't mean that there isn't enough capacity for us to find those additional officers though. But it is a challenge, absolutely. I think it's important to also make a point that all of this money would go to public safety. So in our budget, it won't go to the general fund and then be accounted for. It will actually go into its own separate fund, and it will be audited yearly, and 100% of that money that comes in will go to hiring additional police officers, support staff, court staff, and it will be written in the ordinance and the resolution that all of that money has to go towards public safety. So a question, supplanting, came up. So if you're doing this, well then can't the general fund, won't you steal that money that the general fund is already paying and supplement it with this money? And the answer is no, you can't do that by law. It's a supplanting thing. So we won't be, what's currently in the general fund that goes to public safety will continue to be there, and all of this additional income from the taxes will go over and above that. Any questions before I bring Wayne up? Yes, sir.
I have a quick question, because percentages are hard to figure out, and I think we learned that from the ST3 proposal. And so do you have any data on what a typical dollar amount is going to affect an individual or business? And if you don't, I think that would really be helpful, because there certainly seems to be a need. But you know, if you start with 6% and go to 8%, it's only 2%, but it's a 33% increase. So if you just have some dollars, I think it's a little easier to explain to the typical person, so they don't down the road say, well, I didn't know it was going to cost this.
And sir, that's a very good question. It will cost the average household of 4 in the city of Kent about $11 per month, or about $120 some per year. Great question. That puts it in perspective. All right, Officer Graff.
So, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chief. So, we're a team. So, my name is Wayne Graff, and I'm a board member for the Kent Police Officers Association. I'm speaking today because my role on the Kent Police Officers Association affords me a unique perspective into the Proposition A conversation. And that's in that I have a front row seat to view the impact that improper staffing levels have on our employees and their families. The job of a police officer is hard and stressful and challenging under the best of circumstances. However, when a department is understaffed, the burden of this stressful job increases exponentially, because it's compounded by a lack of sleep and a lack of quality time, which has an overarching result of not allowing our officers to recharge their batteries before they come in for their next shift. The officers, their supervisors, and our civilian staff have all experienced a lengthy period of time striving to continue to provide consistent, high-quality service to our residents and our community, while slowly falling behind the levels of staffing that we see in our neighboring agencies. The Kent Police Department's version of the adage to do more with less is to continue to maintain excellent service, add new programs, and add additional responsibilities, while failing to maintain a rate of growth that is consistent with that of our community. This formula can't continue to work. Over time, our officers are increasingly tired and worn out from working too much overtime, working too many days, and juggling too many tasks. They're dedicated to making sure that nothing gets missed, but I'm here to tell you that things are getting missed. Our officers and our staff are missing time with their children. They're missing their birthdays and their soccer matches. They're missing their anniversaries and time with their spouses. They're missing the downtime that makes them the people who can relate to our community. The Kent Police Department is an accredited law enforcement agency, and they have been for 2 decades. This means that the department consistently meets and complies with high standards of performance and the best practices of law enforcement. Our officers work hard to manage extremely difficult situations that most people will never know. They perform these duties in a way that allows the agency to retain a high level of distinction that accreditation requires. It is critical to maintaining their service levels and their performance levels that they have the proper levels of staffing in order to conduct these tasks. The entire department has done an excellent job so far in providing all things to all people with distinction. They simply cannot continue to reach for the highest bar without some form of relief. The relationship between a city and its police department is symbiotic. As the community grows and changes, so too should its police department. Proposition A represents not only much needed relief for our officers and staff, but also the ability for the police department to grow with our changing community. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cynthia, and I think it was back in December, Chief Thomas called and asked if I would be on the committee for Prop A, and I don't think it was a choice, so of course I said yes. And I had to miss the second meeting, and after that he called me and said, "Oh, you're the chairperson now," so don't miss meetings. Anyway, I just thank you everybody for being here today and for listening to what the chief and Wayne had to share with us today. I know it's always a tough topic when we're talking about raising taxes. Nobody likes to think about that, but sometimes it's just what we need to do to keep our community safer. So thank you hopefully for everybody's support. But regardless, we're happy to continue the conversation. Please like our Facebook page. It's called For a Safer Kent. Vote yes for a Safer Kent. So make sure you like that so that you can follow, what we're doing. We have some fundraisers coming up tonight. Actually, we have one. So jump on the Facebook page and feel free to reach out to any of us that are on the committee, which includes Chief Thomas, Councilmember Tony Troutner, Wayne, myself, Andrea, kind of. And I'm not sure if there's anybody else in the room that's on the committee. But anyway, feel free to reach out to us. We do have envelopes. If anybody wants to make a donation, we'll do that. We would happily accept it. And again, we're happy to answer questions and continue the conversation. So thank you so much.
I'd like to thank Chief Ken Thomas for coming in and speaking. I'd like to thank all of you for coming and the Golden Steer for hosting, along with KSC Freight for sponsoring this. We also have a couple of great events coming up. We have How to Generate More 5-Star Reviews with Asset Lab on the 15th at 1:30. This is a free seminar provided by Jeff Kelly with Asset Lab. Some of you who came to our December luncheon know how wonderful he is with his potato. Just a great dynamic speaker. We can learn quite a bit from him. We also have the Business After Hours. We are co-hosting it with the Auburn Chamber of Commerce, so lots of regional networking there. It is free for our members. Muckleshoot is doing a huge spread of food. We get to enter in the VIP smoke-free entrance. You're going to be parking in the garage, and we'll be sending out more information on that. But that is February 22nd from 5 to 7 p.m.
John, nice to meet you. Yeah. Back to see you anytime.